So welcome to everybody. I'm trying not to highlight any one person or two people. I want to be careful about that, but at the same time, it's wonderful to see our sister. The theme this morning, and I love, by the way, before I get started, I love Brother Jim. I'll say Jim, he's Jimmy to me, but I love Brother Jim's speaking last week. He said, I don't know who came up with this creative ways to title our sermons, he said, but it's a chore and it's exhausting to him. And he gave it to the congregation to put a title to his sermon last week, which was a lot of fun. I won't give you that liberty and I apologize, but you certainly can rename my message this morning. There's no offense to that. But the message this morning is to see or not to see. If I had any class about me, I would go on to say that is the question, but I won't do that. I'll just say to see or not to see. And we'll go into kind of where that came from and why, and then move forward. But first, it came probably to me, the seeds were planted, I'm sure, in walks with Candace. We try to take a walk together every single day unless the weather becomes 15 degrees and snowy like it's been the last 2 days. But normally we take a long walk every day together, and it's, for me, one of my favorite times of the day. And so often, and this is probably an age thing as much as anything else, so often one of us will see something and try to get the other person to see what we're looking at. And if it's in the sky, it's almost impossible because there's just not enough reference points in the sky. Okay, you see the tree right there on the left. Okay, now come up about 10 feet, 10 feet to my eyes, not 10 feet. And then we're trying to get them to see something in the sky. And by that time, it's gone. So we miss it. But that's where it came from. I began to think, can you see what I see? So that's where the thought came from. As I look back over the last couple weeks, after I hope this is the Lord's message, after this theme came together, I looked back over the last couple weeks and I thought, I don't know if this is in part 3 of the last 3-week messages. It was certainly not by design. I tried to be an open book each and every Sunday, allowing the Lord to have his way with me and hopefully inspire the message. So I don't believe I came to this with any kind of bias, but as I reviewed 2 weeks ago, 2 Sundays ago, 2 messages ago, the message was the mirror effect, if you remember, and seeing ourselves as God sees us. Last week, I gave it a title, but I'll just reference Brother Jim Lambert's message as our battles and working through our battles and understanding that God will take care of us in our battles. So I don't know if seeds weren't planted in those 2 messages, but I thought I came into this free thinking. But if so, and if this is God's message, and I pray it is, then this is part 3 probably to those 2 messages as we start this new year. So to see or not to see, before we get to the scripture, comes from, and I'm sure many of you know this already, comes from Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, to be or not to be. And it's the opening soliloquy, if you will, the opening monologue by Hamlet as he's contemplating very, very serious decisions. And to put it succinctly, but gently, not knowing how many ears and how many eyes are on us this morning, he's making a decision whether to go on or not. And I'll say it that way. And then if you read this beautiful, impassioned speech, if you will, or oration, if you will, the magnificence of viewing the options is amazing. So I'm going to read some to you, and I'm going to try my best not to be dramatic, because you start to read anything with a Shakespearean theme to it and you feel like you have your back has to get erect and you have to pose and do this long talk. So I'm going to do my best just to share this with you and not get too corny here. But just the beginning of it is very moving, at least to me. To be, and again, he's questioning whether to be, whether to exist or not to exist. And if not to exist, taking that matter in his own hands, speaking again in code, I apologize, not to offend anyone, but it's also not to offend anyone. So I'm not trying to be clever here. I'm trying to be careful with some of the ears or eyes that may be behind the screens. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. Should I battle against my demons or not, or should I just give in? To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. As I read that, I thought of Jesus Christ accepting the flesh, accepting all that he had to endure by way of the thousand natural shocks that each of us have to endure. Going on, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. As I'm reading this, I'm getting goosebumps. It's just an amazing deep dive into the back and forth that I would guess anyone contemplating such serious things would at least entertain, at least navigate through. So again, a little bit of Old English to get us there. I hope you understood it. So we're going to go to and that's where this comes from, to be or not to be. And our theme is to see or not to see. And I believe they're very similar. The two themes are very similar. And it's a question of whether to live or not. The first one is a literal question, to be or not to be. The second one is a spiritual question. Am I willing to live higher, or allow my dreams, my spiritual potential, all that God has planned for me, will I allow that to die? So while it's not quite as dramatic, the question is as serious, and the consequences are as great. So this morning, I would ask you to ask yourself, to see or not to see, what will I choose? Second Kings, the 6th chapter. And that's the only scripture we're going to use this morning. You've heard it. I'm positive of this. You've heard this chapter before. It's great. That's why. The reason you've heard it is it's great. It begins, maybe you've heard just the first 7 verses. I don't have those I did not use those at all this morning, but just to tell you, the first 7 verses are amazing. And I never saw them through the lens, and there's a double entendre there, through the lens of sight. But only to the extraordinary account that is spoken of, and it's the floating axe head. They're cutting trees down to build dwelling places for themselves, and one of them breaks the axe, and the axe head, the steel axe head, falls into the water. And he says, "I can't work on. There's nothing I can do. I can't work on." And Elisha asks him, "Well, where did you drop it?" And he said, "It's down there." And he points to the water, and it seems that Elijah throws a board into the water and prays to God, and the metal axe head floats to the top. And so we have this incredible experience and hand of God and his showing of his power to these people. That alone, maybe you've heard in a sermon, verses 1 through 7. And again, I'm just telling you, we're skipping that today. It didn't apply, so I'm not going to use that. I'm going to read you something that I find entertaining, and I hope when you read the word, you look for everything, both those things that enrich you spiritually and enrich you naturally as well. But in the dialogue, it says this in verse 8: "The king of Syria warred against Israel and took counsel with his servants, saying, in such a place shall be my camp. And I just love that the author writes in there such and such a place. I don't know if he's hiding the information from us thousands of years later so we don't go to such and such a place, or I don't know that he forgot what he named, but he literally writes in the words such and such a place. Sorry for the sharp left turn. I just wanted to read that to you to entertain you as I was this morning. But we're going to jump down to verse 16 is where we're going to go to, and I'll tell you 8 through 15. So it seems that war has been established, and there's going to be an attack. And Elisha is the loyal man of God who is following God's people and protecting God's people as the voice of God and the conduit from man to God. And so Elisha's role is critical here. And when the servant of man was risen, and so the people of God have gone to this mountainside and are being followed, unknown to them, are being followed by he who had the Syrians, he who has declared war on them, unknown to them. And so they're fearful of them. There's a long-standing fight between the two worlds, but they're unaware that they're being followed so closely. And there's some back and forth that goes on between this. And I want you to read 8 through 15. I want you to read those verses. At one point, the Syrian king says, we must have a spy in our camp because they seem to know everything about us. And it's reported to him, there is no spy here. We're all loyal to you. But they have a man of God who seems to be able to hear everything. He even hears, and he says to him, he even hears your words in your bedchamber. So Elisha is connected to God and sees, if you will, sees everything through the eyes of God, sees everything that's taking place. So he has advantage over these people in a spectacular, magnificent, divine way. And when the servant in 15, and when the servant of man of God had risen early and gone forth, behold, a host. And I'm going to take the N out of that, the Old English N out of that, and say a host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, sorry, I missed 14. Therefore he sent thither horses and chariots and a great host. They came by night and compassed the city about. I apologize, I missed a key verse there. So they are surrounded by an army. I want you to visualize this. I want you to see this in your mind. They're surrounded by this army. And the servant said unto him, alas, my master, what he says, how shall we do? What he's saying is, what should we do? What now? We have no way out. There's no exit plan. We can't beat them. How do we handle this situation? And Elisha answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Now that alone, we could stop right now. And you're in such danger of a 45-minute sermon just on that statement alone. But I want you to feel that verse. They that be with us are more than they that be with them. I'm just going to pause and say hi to Leah. I see that Leah just joined us from Scotland. It's great to see she's back safely. Sorry. Back to 17. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes. Now he's speaking of his assistant. He's speaking of his right-hand man. Open his eyes that he may see. Now I'm going to pause there. I want you to understand what's happening here. Elisha is called out of his tent to look up into the hills and see the natural danger that surrounds them. And Elisha does. I want to make sure you all understand. Elisha sees the danger, but Elisha also is given to see what's above them, to see this incredible vision that God gives to him. Now he's asking generously that his assistant, his aide, his right-hand man is able to see the same thing. There's so many verses. We just read Paul's conversion, and they use a phrase that I'm going to use today. The scales were taken from their eyes. And so what he's praying is, Lord, take the scales from my servant's eyes that he might see what I see. Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. Our theme today is to see or not to see. What changed in this moment? I want you to really think about this. What changed? The fact is, an army, a natural army that could certainly take them, certainly have victory over them, certainly take their lives violently. That didn't change. That army remained right there. The circumstance that they were in did not change. I want you to bring this to 2022. You're not in the hills. There's not an army around you, but you may have a circumstance that encompasses you, that you see no way out of. I don't know each of you, and I don't know each of your situations, but put yourself on the hillside so that you now see your circumstance as this army. And I want to say to you, you're right. You're right if you feel the impending danger. You're right if you feel threatened. You're right. But I pray that the Lord might open your eyes, that you might see. Because just above that danger are more than the danger itself. I want you to understand that. I always go to the Wizard of Oz in my mind in these cases, always. And it's the story of Dorothy who meanders. You know, it's probably days, but go with me in my romanticism. It's years, say. It's years of wandering, searching for the answer, only to come to the end after all of this futile search ends. And she sees the balloon flying off with this false wizard flying off, and her hope is gone. I hope you're joining me on this last scene of The Wizard of Oz and seeing what I see right now. And then the bubble comes flying or floating down. And the good witch says to her, "Oh, Dorothy, you always had the power." And in this case, the good witch says, "Click your heels 3 times. In our case, I say, kneel on the ground and pray. The power is yours. Open your eyes that you might see just above your danger, your situation awaits God's rescue. But if you don't raise your eyes just that far, you'll never see them." Candace, do you see the jet in the air just over by those trees? If you look past those trees, over by that house, and she may or may not see it because I'm not guiding her. Today, I'm guiding you properly. Just raise your eyes just a few inches above your danger, and you'll see that God awaits with his answer. To see or not to see. As it was in to be or not to be, it's a choice. If you raise your eyes off these earthly, real situations, I want to be clear on this, that army truly was in the hills waiting to attack. I'm not telling you that your situation isn't real. I'm not telling you that the impending danger that you feel isn't real. It may be. But I am telling you there's an answer just above it. The army is greater than anything that you're up against. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha, in verse 17. Now watch what Elisha does. To see or not to see. Here comes like the double entendre of this story. And I don't remember reading on after that and catching this. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, smite this people. This natural army is what he's speaking of. Smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And God smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. My servant, might your eyes be given the vision that I see. Lord, open his eyes. And they were. Same mouth that prayed to open eyes, prayed to close eyes. Lord, close their eyes that they can't find us any longer. Take the threat away. I don't know what your situation is, but we have the power to blind that circumstance and win the battle. Now, I don't know what happened with this young man in this moment. I don't know if this was instant. I don't know if the young man said, what do you mean open my eyes? I'm looking right now. I don't know if this was a 10-minute situation. I'm not bringing any conclusions to this, by the way. I'll let you answer this question within. But if that young man were like most of us, maybe there was questions or doubts. But Elisha, I see the army. What do you mean open my eyes? You don't have to open my eyes. I see what you're telling me to see. Maybe Elisha had to say to him, no, look higher. Look higher. There's just a hillside. In fact, I see more weapons up above them that they've put up in the hills above them. There's more than what I see in the army. No, look above that. Lord, open his eyes. Let him see. I had a class on Tuesday night. In the class, we talked about Paul's great conversion and the fact that Paul stayed comatose for 3 days. We kind of went back and forth on why or if or what happened. Could he have just been healed in the moment? And Sister Patty said it was in those 3 days maybe that were needful for Paul to be fully converted. Had to come to terms with, understand that it's not that easy. You can't just say, oh, let me see now, and then he gets his vision back. He needed to sit and struggle just a little longer so that he might appreciate when the healing came. It's fabulous, fabulous interpretation. So I don't know about this young man, if it was instant or not. But if it wasn't, I offer no judgment to this young man. He was answering as a man. You're asking, Elisha, you're asking for something I've never experienced before. Open my eyes. My eyes are open. What is that? I don't even understand what you're saying to me. So it must have been magnificent, whether it was instant or whether it took a little bit of time. It must have been magnificent when he went, oh, now I see. Oh, now I see what you were telling me. Church of Jesus Christ, open your eyes that you might see that we have the power accessible to us that's greater than any of our situations. Even if it's just to get us to a point of joyfulness in our sorrow. The healing power of God has no limits, none. We place those limits on him. That young man could have said, Elisha, don't even pray that. I don't even know what you're talking about. Don't even pray that. And he would never have seen those that were greater than the literal, natural army that awaited to consume them. The choice is ours. Just like it was for Hamlet, the choice is ours to see or not to see. And not to be corny, but that is the question. That is the spiritual question that you determine. Because I don't know if in this moment that Elisha, and I have Elisha with his arm around his assistant, encouraging him, I don't know if there was someone beside that young man in that moment. I don't think there was. But follow me for a moment. If there was, they probably never saw. Maybe this young man had a family around him and said, Elisha, what is he talking about? Don't even look up. Don't even look up. You're not going to see anything. We all have that. We all have those around us that don't understand the spirituality that I'm addressing this morning. But I wonder if we understand the simplicity of the spirituality that I'm addressing. Just raise your eyes. For they that be with us, be with us, be with us. They're there right now. Whatever your situation is, God has sent his army to battle with you. They're there because they're, quote unquote, with us. For they that be with us are more than they that be with them. For me, them is the evil one and his legions. And by the way, Google legions and go look that up in the scripture. It is literal to a great story. It ends with a fabulous cliff dive, but that's up to you to go read if you want to. But when I read not as great as them, I read the evil one and his legions that he sends to discourage us, to try to infuse a good memory so that we remember the losses that we've gone through, so that we remember when the story didn't go so well for us, so that's our recall, so that when our Elisha, whoever that is in our lives, says, raise your eyes, open their eyes that they might see, raise your eyes just a little more, we'll resist that. I never really understood the story in the Old Testament. They held the serpent up and said if they just look at it, they'd be rescued. And some didn't even look, but I didn't understand that. I think I do now. I think they counted it foolishness. I've heard these stories before. If you just do this, you'll get that. And it never worked before. I'm not going to even look up at that serpent. As is the story today. We know the correlation. That beautiful verse in the New Testament says, like the serpent, I think it was the New Testament, it might have been the Book of Mormon, but if they would just have looked up to the serpent and lived as it is, if they would just look to Jesus Christ. And yet people don't. Because their lives are filled with quite possibly more losses than victories. They've lost their hope. Might even be truly at that to be or not to be moment in their life. But we are at that to see or not to see moment for certain. And I ask you to raise your eyes, see what the Lord has. We have accessible power. And he wants you to utilize that. The story is perfection. If you humble yourselves, look up to God, and he blesses you, brings you a miracle, you'll tell that story to others, and more will come to Jesus Christ. He wants these victories in our lives so that we go out and tell others of the hope of Jesus Christ. So you don't have to contemplate to see or not to see. You don't have to wonder which is the better decision. You don't have to wonder what the outcome will be. It's promises made, and promises will be kept. Don't use your interactions with other people on this earth to judge God. Every time someone makes a promise, they break it. Every time someone says, I'll do this, they don't. They come short. And so when God says, just raise your eyes, we bring those losses into the equation and say, I know, but I've had so much loss. I can't risk it again. It's just too scary to risk my heart one more time. Picture yourself standing next to Elisha right now in this moment, as he says this about you. Lord, I pray thee, open their eyes that they may see that your story would end this way. And the Lord opened the eyes of you, and you saw. May the Lord bless you with vision. May the Lord bless you with sight. May the Lord bless you with courage and faith. And I understand, Lord, we believe, help thou mine unbelief. I understand that. That's all of us. You're no less. You're not weaker. You are us. That's all. We all struggle. But I'm asking you, take a step forward. Raise your eyes. Because the question before you is simple: to see or not to see. May the Lord bless each one of you.